So recently, I've been having a lot of talk and discussions about this whole gender dysphoria topic and Bruce Jenner and whether or not gender dysphoria is a mental disorder or whether it's not a disorder or whether it's a physical disorder or what it is. What is gender dysphoria? So today I wanted to bring my opinion to the table and just give some philosophical arguments here, defending positions and so forth. So I'm just going to start here with defining what I'm talking about, because there's so much changing of definitions here when it comes to the whole transgender topic. Definitions keep changing because the ideological concept of what a transgender is, what transgender means, what gender dysphoria is, what gender is. The whole topic of gender is just being trying to be figured out in this relative point of time. So I'm going to define the words that I'm going to be personally talking about, and for the purposes of this video, I guess. So transgender, for all intent of purposes of this video, means I'll be talking about transgender as the definition that basically, it keeps changing over time. But what we're going to talk about here today are the people born into a boy's body who are sure they are girls, and the people who are born into a girl's body who are sure they are boys. So I'm aware that there's a whole umbrella of genders that a transgender person can identify as, but for all intents and purposes for this video, we're going to focus on the people who think, like the men who think they're in a woman's body, and the women who believe that they're in a men's body. So that's the transgender definition we're going to be talking about. So gender dysphoria means, what is the definition of gender dysphoria? It is the condition of feeling one's emotional and psychological identity as male or female to be opposite to one's biological sex. So this comes straight from the Google definition. You just type it into Google, and this is the definition that will pop up. I believe it's from the DSM, directly from the DSM. So basically, yeah, a person doesn't feel like they are born into the right body. Their feelings of who they are opposite to the one's biological sex, and yeah, that basically is basically the same definition as transgender, except for yeah, I don't know. Okay, so kind of a side note here with gender dysphoria is a person must be diagnosed with gender dysphoria to undergo a transition or a sex reassignment surgery. So in order to have the sex reassignment surgery done, in order to change your gender into a girl, if you're a man, you have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So basically, that's the definitions. Let's jump into the main points here now. So basically, what the two main truths that we're going to be talking about here is that, first one, premise one, a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has a medical disorder. Okay, that's a medical disorder. Okay, well, just hear me out for now and I'll explain a little bit later. So premise two is all medical disorders are either physical disorder or a mental disorder. So gender dysphoria with these two definitions can either be a physical disorder or a mental disorder. And this is true no matter what perspective you look at it with. Gender dysphoria is a medical disorder. It is either, but both perspectives that you can look at it with is that it's a physical disorder or a mental disorder. And we'll look at this right about now. So the proof of the second premise that all medical disorders are either physical or mental is that, well, we look up the definition of medical disorder, and we find there's a lot of different definitions, but I just collected a few here saying, well, it's a defect in a person's state of being. So that is just a medical disorder is a defect in a person's state of being. It's also a derangement or abnormality of function, a morbid physical or mental state, a disturbance or derangement that affects the function of mind or body, an atypical physical or mental condition. So basically, a medical disorder is a defect that affects the mental state or the physical state of being. So yes, a medical disorder is either a physical or mental disorder. So It's just basically a descriptive word, a differentiation between the words. So a physical disorder, what is a physical disorder exactly? A physical disorder is a defect in a person's physical state of being. So I guess the best way to kind of describe this is give it some examples. So an example of physical disorder is like a cognitive disorder such as Alzheimer's, or some diseases which are a disorder of the structure or function of a human, such as cancer or diabetes. So these are more of diseases, right? Obviously. So and then we have some examples of genetic disorders such as Down syndrome or polydactyly, which is born with 12 fingers or toes. And I mean the examples of physical disorders are endless. There's so many so many physical disorders. It's just a defect in the person's state of being, physical state of being. So, like obviously Alzheimer's is a deterioration of your mind, your brain. Diseases are just physical abnormalities. They're defects in your body, like cancer or diabetes. And genetic disorders are disorders from your genetics, which causes things like Down syndrome, or being born with 12 fingers or 12 toes, and also things like being intersexed, or all these different disorders. They're physical. They affect your physical state of being. And a mental disorder affects your mental state of being. It's a defect in a person's mental state of being. So examples include depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, eating disorders such as anorexia, body dysmorphic disorder, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. So all these are mental disorders. They all affect a person's mental state of being. So I mean, this is all pretty obvious here, but just to make sure we're differentiating the two. So a physical disorder is often used as a term in contrast to a mental disorder in an attempt to differentiate medical disorders that have an available mechanical test, such as chemical tests or brain scans, from those disorders which have no lab test or imaging test and are diagnosed only by behavioral syndrome. So basically, you can tell if it's a physical disorder. If there's a physical test, you can tell from the physical body, by observing the physical body, that it is a physical disorder. And a mental disorder is observing the mentality of a person and seeing if there's any disorder there. So that is proof for number 2, that all medical disorders are either physical or disordered. So how does that fit in with the transgender topic, the gender dysphoria topic? Well, let's go back to proof number 1. Or we'll prove premise 1 now. So a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has a medical disorder. A medical disorder. So the fact that a person is the fact that a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has a mental disorder is undeniable. If someone truly believes they are a man in a woman's body, there's obviously a defect in the person's state of being, either physical or mental. The debate over gender dysphoria is not a debate over whether it's a medical disorder or not, but rather whether it's a physical disorder or a mental disorder. So we're going to look at this from each perspective to prove to you that it is a medical disorder. Whether it's a physical or mental disorder, we don't know yet. Okay, but from the mental disorder perspective, gender dysphoria is viewed as a defect in the person's mental state of being. You will commonly hear things like transgenders are delusional, and if you have an urge to cut off perfectly good body parts, then it is definitely a mental disorder. From this perspective, gender dysphoria is identified as a mental disorder and would be treated with mental treatment. But from the LGBT perspective, which is more of a physical disorder perspective, gender dysphoria is seen as something wrong with a person's physical state of being. You'll commonly hear things like, I was born into the wrong body, something went wrong at birth, it's no different from any other birth defect, things of that nature. It's just, you're born in the wrong body. And that emphasizes that there's something wrong with your body. It's a physical disorder. So from the LGBT perspective, gender dysphoria is identified as a physical disorder and would be treated with physical treatment. So proof number 1, a person is diagnosed with a gender dysphoria has a medical disorder. As we can see from both perspectives, it is seen as there's a disorder in the way the person's created. From the mental perspective, it's seen as there's something wrong with the mental capacity of the person's brain. And from the physical perspective, we can see that it is something wrong with the physical body. I was born in the wrong body. This is something wrong with this body. My body needs to change in order to match my mentality. So that is true. That is either a physical or mental. But what is it? How do we know whether gender dysphoria is a physical or mental disorder? Well, there are many arguments. So let's jump into the arguments. The arguments of... Well, I guess the first one that we're just going to jump into here. We're not going to go over all the arguments because I don't really have all the arguments laid out here, but we're going to go over 5. So the birth defect argument. This argues that it's a physical disorder, that gender dysphoria is a physical disorder, and we're going to jump right into this. So people diagnosed with gender dysphoria suffer from a birth defect where the person was born into the wrong body. So this is premise 1 of the argument. So basically, the idea is that a person that identifies as transgender or that is diagnosed with gender dysphoria believes that they are born into the wrong body because of a birth defect, and they don't want to be in this body, like they're not supposed to be in this body, it's just a birth defect. Okay, so premise 2 is all birth defects are physical disorders. So the conclusion, based off these premises, if they're both true, then the conclusion is gender dysphoria is a physical disorder. Because if all birth defects are physical disorders and gender dysphoria is a birth defect, then, well, obviously gender dysphoria is a physical disorder. So that is the argument for the physical disorder of gender dysphoria with the birth defect argument. So the counter argument to the birth defect argument, would be supporting the mental case, would be saying that premise 1, people with birth defects have genetic disorders in their DNA. So when you look at the person with the birth defect's DNA, you can visibly see genetic disorder, and that's true. Premise 2, a person without a birth defect has perfectly normal DNA. So if you don't have a birth defect, you have perfectly normal DNA. Premise 3, a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has perfectly normal DNA. Therefore, conclusion goes, a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has no birth defect. So if all these premises are true, a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has no birth defect. And that is going to be true, because when you look at the DNA of a person that's diagnosed with gender dysphoria, unless they're suffering from Down syndrome or some other genetic defect, they're not going to be. Objectively looking at a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria, they're going to have normal DNA. There's nothing that gender dysphoria, there's nothing about it that has anything to do with your genetic material. So there is no genetic disorders when it comes to gender dysphoria, and therefore there is no birth defect in a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So the first premise of the birth defect argument is not true. First premise not true. Person diagnosed with gender dysphoria suffer a birth defect because they just don't suffer a birth defect. There's no birth defects present in a person that suffers or that is diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So therefore, the conclusion does not follow that gender dysphoria is a physical disorder. That doesn't prove that it's not a physical disorder. It just disproves that this argument is. It just disproves this argument. This argument is not valid. You cannot say that gender dysphoria is a physical disorder because of these reasons. But this argument does not prove it to be a mental disorder either. So it's just disproving this argument. So we'll go on to the next argument. You can change your sex argument. The physical argument that supports the physical disorder of gender dysphoria is that you can change your sex. This argument goes as follows. A person can change the sex of their body if it's biologically possible to correct the external genitalia a person was born with. So if you can correct and change the external genitalia that a person was born with, then it's biologically possible. If it's biologically possible to correct the external genitalia, then a person can change the sex of the body. So premise 2 goes as follows. It's biologically possible to correct the external genitalia of a person who is born... I read that wrong. It's biologically possible to correct the external genitalia a person was born with through sex reassignment surgery. Conclusion is a person can change the sex of their body through sex reassignment surgery. So if all these premises are true, then the conclusion follows as true. So we'll look at the counter argument now. So premise 1: to change the sex of a person's body, one must change his or her birth sex DNA. So this is the DNA you are born with, either XY or XX. XY means you're a female, I believe, right? Female? Yeah. XY is female, and XX... You know what? I don't even know. Yep, I don't even know. I guess I should have looked that up beforehand. It's either XX or XY as male or female. So to change the sex of a person's body, you must be able to change his or her birth sex DNA. You must be able to flip it from XY to XX or XX to XY. Okay. Premise 2 goes as follows. Changing one's sex DNA is biologically impossible. It is not possible to biologically change your DNA. At least not your birth sex DNA. You can't change your XY chromosome to XX or your XX chromosome to XY. It's biologically impossible to change this fact. This is a normal part of your body. And this goes for a lot of different things inside your body as well. For example, females and males' brains are biologically different. They function differently. Females and males think differently. There's different parts of the brains that are just different. Scientists can look at the brains of a male and they can look at the brain of a female, and they can differentiate if it's a male or a female just by looking at the brain. Same with the body structure, same with the skeletal structure. Scientists can look at, well, obviously anybody can look at a skeleton of a man and a skeleton of a female and say that's a male, that's a female. It's impossible to biologically change one's birth sex. Well, I guess that's the conclusion. To change the sex of a person's body is biologically impossible. It is not possible to biologically change your sex. So the first premise of the you can change your sex argument is not true, because you cannot change your sex. A person cannot change their sex. Even if it's biologically possible to correct the external genitalia a person is born with, you can't change the brain. You can't change the DNA. You can't change the skeleton. You can't do it. It's impossible. It's not possible. It's absurd to think you can. And many people that have gone through the sex reassignment surgery have come to this conclusion. Walt Heyer is a good example. He went through sex change operation, and he lived as a woman for 8 years. And after 8 years, he finally came to the conclusion that I'm still a man. They took off my genitalia. They replaced it with this weird... I don't even know how to explain it, because I guess I'm not in his shoes, but they replaced it. I'm not a man anymore. I'm nothing. That's what he believes, because you can't change your birth sex. It's impossible. Even if you can change the genitalia, you're not changing the sex you were born with. So it's not possible to change your sex, not even with sex reassignment surgery. Premise 1 is false. That leads the conclusion to be false. A person cannot change the sex of their body through sex reassignment surgery. Okay, so let's go to the first argument that proves that gender dysphoria is a mental. Well, I guess this one doesn't prove that it's a mental, but it supports the mental mental disorder argument. So The ethical surgery argument. Is sex reassignment surgery ethical? We'll look at it. Premise 1. In an ethical act of surgery, a diagnosed physical disorder can be corrected. Otherwise, surgery is not prescribed. So in any instance of a physical disorder, the surgery is prescribed to correct the physical disorder. So, for example, in the instance of cancer, there's many different prescriptions that you can get for surgery with cancer. Let's say if you have, I guess the main example. I mean, you can have lots of forms of cancer, but let's say you have skin cancer. They can remove that. They can surgically remove skin cancer if it hasn't spread far enough. And that includes, also prostate cancer or breast cancer. They can perform surgery easily and remove those instances of cancer. They just remove the prostate, remove the breast, and that would be an example of a surgery correcting the physical disorder. But there's instances with cancer too where surgery can't correct it. For instance, if the cancer has spread too much, and surgery won't be able to correct the disorder, the physical disorder, and surgery will not be prescribed because no amount of surgery they can do will get rid of that disorder without making your body not be able to function. They'll have to remove too much in order for your body to be able to function properly. So they say, well, we can't prescribe to you surgery. You're just going to have to, we can give you medication, we can give you whatever, but this is your deadline. They can't do physical, they don't prescribe surgery in those instances. So in an ethical act of surgery, a diagnosed physical disorder can be corrected. Otherwise, surgery is not prescribed. And I want to kind of go into a genetic disorder with this one too, an example. So let's say a person is born with Down syndrome, genetic disorder. Surgery is not going to be prescribed in a Down syndrome case because no amount of surgery will be able to fix a genetic disorder. No amount of surgery can fix a genetic disorder. Depending on the disorder, but when it comes to Down syndrome, surgery is not going to fix anything. They're not going to prescribe surgery because that's not the case. So with this premise in mind, and let's read it again and we'll go on to the next one. In an ethical act of surgery, a diagnosed physical disorder can be corrected. Otherwise, surgery is not prescribed. So if it can't be corrected, surgery is not prescribed. So premise 2. In sex reassignment surgery, the diagnosed physical disorder cannot be corrected, but surgery is still prescribed. So the physical disorder that we're talking about here is that a person is born in the wrong body. And as we could see from the last argument that we came over, it's biologically impossible to change the sex of one's body. So the purpose of reassignment surgery is to change the sex of one's body. And that's the diagnosed physical disorder. And that cannot be corrected. Biologically, it's impossible to correct this fact. But surgery is still prescribed. So if in an ethical surgery, a diagnosed physical disorder can be corrected, otherwise surgery is not prescribed, then sex reassignment surgery is not an ethical surgery because the physical disorder that's diagnosed cannot be corrected with sex change surgery. It's not possible. It's not possible to correct it. So why are we trying to correct a physical disorder that we cannot correct? And if it is a physical disorder, why are we trying to correct it if we can't correct it? Because it just doesn't make sense. Sex reassignment surgery is not an ethical surgery. And if you do believe that gender dysphoria is a mental disorder, and you still prescribe surgery, why? Why are you prescribing medical surgery to a mental disorder? Physical surgery will never fix a mental disorder. You wouldn't prescribe surgery to a person with depression or anxiety. You wouldn't subscribe surgery to any mental disorder. So if you think gender dysphoria is a disorder, why are you prescribing surgery to it? It doesn't make sense. You're not going to fix the mental disorder. If you think it's a mental disorder, it's not going to be fixed with surgery. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Sex reassignment surgery is not an ethical surgery, whether you believe it's a mental disorder or a physical disorder. Because if you believe it's a physical disorder, it cannot be corrected. If you believe it's a mental disorder, physical surgery is never going to fix a mental disorder. So, sex reassignment surgery is not an ethical surgery. Leave in the comments if you believe one of my premises to be false. I can have dialogue with you, but as for now, we're going to go on to the next argument. So this is a simple argument that shows that gender dysphoria is a mental disorder. So the diagnostic argument it supports mental disorder. Premise 1: a physical disorder is diagnosed through physical analysis and testing. So if a person thinks you have a physical disorder, if you think you have a physical disorder, you can test it through physical analysis, observation of the body, testing of the body, X-rays, MRIs, whatever it is. You can physically test the body for a physical disorder. Okay. Premise 2: a mental disorder is diagnosed through the mental analysis and testing of the body. Not of the body, of the mind. It's mental analysis and testing. So a mental disorder is diagnosed through psychiatry. It's diagnosed through getting into the brain of the person and trying to diagnose if there's something wrong there, if there's depression, if there's anxiety, if there's some sort of OCD, ADHD, ADD, whatever might be there. You're going through psychiatry. You're going to go to a therapist, and they're going to diagnose you based on your mental behaviors. Okay, so a mental disorder is diagnosed through mental analysis and testing, not physical. Okay, so premise 3: gender dysphoria is diagnosed through mental analysis and testing. It's diagnosed through mental analysis and testing. No physical testing whatsoever can be done to diagnose someone with gender dysphoria. It's not a physical test, it's a mental test. So the conclusion with these premises is that gender dysphoria is a mental disorder, because a mental disorder is diagnosed through mental analysis and testing. So, that's a simple argument there. Again, leave in the comments if you want to contest any of these premises, and we'll have a discussion. The fifth and final argument, but the third one that supports it as a mental disorder, is the mental capability argument. Okay, so this one I think is the most complex. I guess maybe the best argument there is out of the 5, but we'll see. Out of the 3 mental, I don't know, whatever. We'll see. You can be the judge. Premise 1: a gender dysphoria is either a physical disorder or a mental disorder. We already went over this. It's a physical disorder or a mental disorder. Premise 2: all people with a physical disorder are capable of mentally coming to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction with the reality of their disorder. So, what does the sentence mean? Well, we'll kind of break down. So, let's take an example of somebody with Down syndrome. Okay, a person with a physical disorder. Okay, so a person with Down syndrome, is he or she capable of mentally coming to a state of ease and generalized satisfaction with the reality of his or her disorder? Okay, that's the first question. Or are they condemned? Is the person with Down syndrome condemned to a life where they can't have any ease? They're very at a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction with the reality of their disorder. Obviously, the first question is true, that a person with Down syndrome can mentally come to a state of ease and generalized satisfaction with the reality of their disorder. They're not condemned to a life of unease or dissatisfaction just because they have a disorder. But if a person with Down syndrome feels, they can compare themselves with others. They can compare themselves with other people without disorders that are normal in any sense, and they are capable of being in a mental state that is unease and generalized with dissatisfaction. Like that's probably true in some or a lot of cases. Like they look at others and they say, "Wow, I'm not normal." Like, and they get depressed over that. But at the same time, they are capable of mentally coming to a state of ease and generalized satisfaction with the reality of disorder. So a person with Down syndrome they can realize the reality of their disorder, and they can be like, okay, this is how I was made. This is how I was born. This is the way it is. This is the way it has to be. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing anybody can do to change this about me, this genetic disorder. I just gotta live my life to the best as I can with this disorder. I'm not gonna let it ruin my life. I'm not gonna let it get in the way of anything. I'm just gonna live my life the best I can. So with this mentality, they are able to come to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction with the reality of the disorder, even though they still have it. So they can come to a place where they're content and happy even though they have this disorder. And this is true even with a person with cancer. Like, sure, it might suck if they can't get the cancer removed and they have a deadline when they're gonna their life is gonna come to an end. But at the same time, they can say, okay, this is how it is. I'm gonna live my life the best. It doesn't matter. I'm content. I'm not gonna let this get down on me. I'm just gonna live my life to the best I can. So, all people with a physical disorder are capable of mentally coming to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction with the reality of the disorder. Okay, so premise 3. A person diagnosed with gender dysphoria is not capable of mentally coming to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction with the reality of his or her disorder. So, why can't they why aren't they capable of mentally coming to a state of ease? Well, if you truly believe you are a woman in a man's body or vice versa, if you truly believe you are a man in a woman's body, you're not going to be content with that. You're not going to be at a state of ease with that reality. I mean, sure, you can live like a happy life, but when it comes to the reality of your disorder, of being a man in a woman's body, they can't. A person that believes that they're a woman in a man's body or a man in a woman's body can't come to satisfaction with that fact. If they truly believe they're a man in a woman's body or a woman in a man's body, there's no state of ease or generalized satisfaction with that fact. And that's true. Because, and here's even proving it further. A person that's diagnosed with gender dysphoria, what does dysphoria even mean? What does the word dysphoria even mean? Well, that's the thing. The word dysphoria actually means, if you look it up on Google, the first definition that comes up, a state of ease or generalized, a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction. So by definition, gender dysphoria is being at a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction with the reality of his or her disorder. That's what gender dysphoria means. You are a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction with the reality of his or her disorder, with your disorder. That's what it means. And it's funny because in order to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, there has to be present in your mind a discontent with your gender, a discontent with the state of your reality. A person diagnosed by definition with gender dysphoria is not capable of mentally coming to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction with the reality of his or her disorder. It's not possible. By definition, it is not possible. So, if all people with a physical disorder are capable of mentally coming to a state of ease and a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria is not mentally capable of coming to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction, then, conclusion 1, a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria does not have a physical disorder. Because if it was a physical disorder, they would be capable of mentally coming to a state of ease or generalized satisfaction. And let's say somebody they do believe like they're a woman in a man's body, and they are at a state of ease or generalized satisfaction. Well, all the more power to them. But you wouldn't be diagnosed with gender dysphoria then, because to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria means that you have to be you do have this dysphoria. Because if you don't have this dysphoria, this state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction, you won't be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. You have to have dysphoria to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria does not have a physical disorder. Conclusion 2, a person diagnosed with gender dysphoria has a mental disorder. So those are all the arguments about this whole not all of the arguments. I'm sure there's more out there, but those are all the ones that I came up with. So leave your comments to maybe engage in any of the premises that I've given. Maybe just try to prove they're wrong, just maybe confirm they're right. Just whatever. Just leave a comment. Let's have some discussions. So that's the video. Hopefully you guys get some good content and some good ideas from this video. Maybe this will help, just generate some discussion on the whole Bruce Jenner topic, the whole gender dysphoria topic, whether it's a mental disorder, a physical disorder, or not. And we'll continue from there. So, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day.